just finished a book that you absolutely loved. It completely consumed your life, it's all you think about, and now you have no idea what to read next. I think there are two ways that you can go about this dilemma. Either you can read a book that is totally different from the one that you just read, kind of like a palate cleanser, something to lift you out of the world, engage you in a completely different story where you're not having to compare how you feel about the two books individually. I think that's the easier route to take. The more difficult route is trying to find a book that is similar to the one that you just read and loved, to continue those feelings of how you felt about the first book. That one is a much more difficult thing to accomplish, and it is what I'm here to help with today. So I have picked out 5 books that I think are pretty popular in the booktube, booktok, bookstagram community. Even on Goodreads, if you look at all these books, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of reviews and ratings, and so I think it's safe to say that they are very popular books. And I'm going to recommend a different, maybe less popular book based off of each one that I think you should read next if you're looking for something similar. It'll all start to make sense as we get going, so I'm just gonna waste no more time talking about it and jump right into it. So you've just finished The Cruel Prince, and you love The Cruel Prince. This book follows our main heroine, Jude. She lives in this very treacherous fae realm called Elfham, and she's taken to live there after her parents are murdered by a very powerful fae general, and now she has to live in this time as a mortal human girl and prove herself to all of these fae beings that she is not as weak as they think that she is. And she becomes entangled in all of these palace politics, power struggles, and these deadly schemes, particularly ones that involve the prince of this realm named Cardan. And as she's navigating all of this court intrigue, Jude kind of has to decide for herself how far she's willing to go to prove herself, but also protect the ones that she loves. And this is a classic enemies to lovers romance. Like, they are true enemies. They absolutely hate each other. But I think that The Cruel Prince is sometimes misrepresented as a romance fantasy or a romantasy, and you'll see that anybody that defends The Cruel Prince defends it because it's more of a political fantasy. Like, the romance plot is definitely secondary to the politics and the intrigue of the world, and the people that really love The Cruel Prince love it because of that and not because of the romance. Which is why, for your next book, I would recommend The Traitor's Kiss. This book is also part of a trilogy just like The Cruel Prince, and the second book is The Traitor's Ruin, and the third is The Traitor's Kingdom. But in the first book, we're introduced to our main character, Sage Fowler, and I think that she's kind of similar to Jude from The Cruel Prince because she's very strong-willed main character. She's also an orphan, just like Jude, who has to prove herself in this world that she is not really accustomed to. So the first book in the Traitor's Kiss trilogy kind of is a very, very light retelling of the Disney movie Mulan, where in this town that Sage grows up, once the women become a certain age, they go before the town matchmaker who makes political alliances through marriage for the betterment of this kingdom. And Sage goes to the matchmaker when she comes of age, and wouldn't you know it, does not impress the matchmaker, is not fit for marriage of any kind, but that's okay because Sage doesn't want to get married. But the matchmaker definitely sees something in Sage. She is smart, she is clever, she is very, very intelligent, where a lot of the girls that she's pairing up in marriage are just kind of focused on the surface level things, beauty and status and wealth. So because of what she sees in Sage, the matchmaker offers her a very unexpected role, which is to spy on potential brides and grooms for political alliances. So Sage actually goes undercover as a boy. She decides not to dress as a girl anymore so that she's able to spy on both the men and the women. And she essentially is people watching. She is learning about each groups and deciding who would pair well together in a marriage. But it is all, again, under the guise of this very strategic political mindset, which is why I think it would be a good next read for somebody that likes The Cruel Prince, which is very similar. Everything in here is about the court intrigue, it's about the politics, it's about the intricacies of a fantasy realm and everything that goes into that, the power struggles, the betrayal, the trust issues, all of that. I think that it's very similar between these two series, which is why I feel like somebody that enjoys The Cruel Prince would ultimately enjoy The Traitor's Kiss as well. I think that this also has a really sweet romance. It's not really enemies to lovers, but it definitely is dislike to love, I would say. It takes a while for the romance to blossom. I also think that this eventually throughout the books gets very action-packed. The stakes just continue to get higher, which I think is similar in The Cruel Prince as well. The tension just continues to build and build and build throughout these plots, and they're both kind of set in this kingdom realm, which is why they feel kind of similar to me. Personally, I actually like the Traitor's Kiss trilogy better than The Cruel Prince. I think The Cruel Prince kind of started to drag for me a little bit. It was fun and I did really enjoy it, but there were definitely pockets where I found myself losing steam and getting a little bit bored, but I didn't feel that way with The Traitor's Kiss. I've actually reread this series as well. A couple years after the first time I read it, I wanted to go back and revisit it, and it still felt really exciting to me, really fun. It definitely kept my attention the entire time. It's a young adult series, which also makes it go by really quickly. It's very easy to read, so I think that this would be a great option for somebody looking for something similar after finishing The Cruel Prince. Read The Traitor's Kiss. All right, next I want to talk about Throne of Glass. Unfortunately, I don't have Throne of Glass, the book, because my friend is reading it right now, but I do have Assassin's Blade, so I'm going to use that as the visual representation for the series. So you've just finished Throne of Glass, and your entire world is rocked, obviously. Of course, there's the natural progression where maybe you go on to read more Sarah J. Maas books, and that's totally fine, and I would encourage you to do that. However, if you're looking for a different author with books that kind of feel similar to Throne of Glass specifically, I would recommend The Tiger at Midnight. So The Tiger at Midnight is a South Asian-inspired fantasy that follows our main character named Esha. Similarly to Throne of Glass, where Selena is kind of the world's best assassin of that time, Esha is also known as the world's best assassin. And in both books, the world doesn't know that this assassin is like a 16, 17-year-old girl, a teenage girl, and everybody thinks it's somebody older, probably a man. And so there's similarities there with that storyline. Esha is kind of known as the Viper. And the story takes place in this world that is, again, similar to Throne of Glass. There's this kind of current regime that is corrupt. There's this kingdom that is trying to take over the world and expand, and so there's this war going on, and Esha is kind of part of the resistance and the rebellion. And she comes up against Kunal, who is our other main character, and he actually is a general in the king's army, so he's working for the other side, and he is tasked with hunting Esha down. He doesn't know it's Esha, he's just tasked with hunting the Viper down and getting rid of the Viper because the Viper is quite annoying to their cause. So the entire book is this giant cat and mouse game where Kunal is chasing Esha. Esha continually outsmarts Kunal. Eventually he kind of figures out that actually it's just this teenage girl. They're kind of a similar age. Loyalties start to get tested, and Kunal really has to ask himself, what is he fighting for? What is this kingdom actually advancing? Like, are they the good guys? Who is good and who is bad in this battle? And I think that was really interesting. And again, it's kind of set in the backdrop of this Indian mythology, which is so cool. I loved the writing style. I loved the setting. The characters are great. They have amazing chemistry. And it does really feel kind of like Esha and Selena Sardothian have very similar qualities as our main characters. So in both of these series, our main characters are both very smart, talented, resourceful heroines who are assassins that have a mission that's kind of tied to this greater rebellion. They're both extremely action-packed plots that kind of opens up this greater series in this greater world and this greater plot line. You know, Throne of Glass, I feel like starts so small, but then at the end of the book, this door is just flung wide open that's like, oh, this is something big. This doesn't just kind of take place in an isolated event. This is a big plot, and I think The Tiger at Midnight is pretty similar to that. They both kind of have an enemies to lovers romance going on. You got the political intrigue aspects of it and the rebellion aspects of it. And of course, I think both of them have very rich world building as well. So if you recently read Throne of Glass and you enjoyed that series, particularly the first couple of books, I definitely think that you should try The Tiger at Midnight. This is a trilogy as well. It's a completed trilogy, so you can finish it. You can get all of the answers that you need, and I think that you would really enjoy this book. So definitely try this one out if you liked Throne of Glass. All right, moving on to Just for the Summer. So you have recently read Just for the Summer and realized how good romance books can actually be. I personally think that there is a very wide spectrum of romance books. You have everything over here that is kind of cheesy, silly, extremely over the top. Nothing is realistic about it, but they also have their time and place. You know, it's fun. It can be cozy. It can be sweet and simple, fast reads that I usually gravitate towards for a palate cleanser. On the other side of the spectrum, you have romance books that are kind of like Just for the Summer, where they deal with really intense issues. It's emotional. These characters feel so real and tangible. And yes, it's a romance, but it also feels like a beautiful character study on specific people as they're going through these trials and tribulations. But specifically over here, earlier, I think what marks a really good romance book is realism. At least for me, that's what I gravitate to. If I am reading a romance book that feels real and it feels realistic, especially when it comes to dialogue and what these characters are saying, the decisions that they're making, in my mind, if I can kind of jump to that conclusion the same way that they do, it feels more real to me. And Just for the Summer definitely felt like that. So if you're like me and you enjoyed this book, I would definitely recommend First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. Now, this book is brand new, and I know that people are really talking about it right now, which is very exciting for me. I first got introduced to B.K. Borison when I read the Lovelight Farms series that she wrote, and I think that series kind of fell more into the category over here that I was explaining, where it's just simple, sweet, easy, super fast. You can read them very, very quickly, and there's not a lot of depth to it, but not even in a bad way. It's just cozy and sweet. The first one is like a Christmas book, so you can read it around the holidays, and it just kind of checks that box for like a Hallmark movie type book. However, First Time Caller definitely is more in this category here, where the characters have so much depth to them. It feels way more emotional, it feels way more real, but still under the backdrop of a beautiful romance book. So First Time Caller follows our two main characters, Lucy and Aiden. Lucy, our heroine, is a single mom to a 12-year-old girl, and one of the things that I loved about this book is how the author kind of wrote Lucy's family unit. So she's not with her child's father anymore, but they still do have a really good relationship, and I really appreciated how she kind of showed what an unconventional family can look like. She still has a good relationship with her child's father, but obviously it's not romantic anymore, and so Lucy has kind of lost herself in becoming a mom and providing for her daughter and providing for her family. So she hasn't been on dates in a while, she hasn't dated in a while, and her daughter, again, who's 12 years old, is kind of noticing that Lucy seems sort of sad and lonely. But in Lucy's mind, she's always telling herself, I have all the love I need right here. It doesn't maybe look romantic, but I have all the love that I need. One day, her daughter calls into this radio station called Heartstrings, hosted by Aiden Valentine. Now, Aiden Valentine has been hosting this romantic hotline radio show for many, many years now, and he has become a cynic because of it. A lot of people call into this radio show asking for advice, asking for dating advice, romance advice. A lot of them are crazy and terrible, and they end up just calling to complain about their partners or complain about their spouse, and it has just continued to weigh on Aiden and chip away at his expectations, and he has completely become a cynic who does not believe in love anymore because of the type of people that would call into his show. And because of that, he's gotten very grouchy and grumpy and not fun to listen to on the radio, which means that the ratings of the show have completely tanked. They have like 12 listeners a night, and it's not going well. Well, one night, Lucy's daughter calls into the show asking Aiden for advice for her mom. Through a series of events, Lucy ends up talking to Aiden on the radio that night, and that interview kind of goes totally viral. All of the city is listening, and they just fall in love with Lucy, and they want to know what happens next to her, and she's got all these people calling in asking her out on a date, and it's just kind of this wild, crazy thing that happens. And Lucy ends up going on the radio show and basically helping Aiden host it for a while, while also trying to find a date and a partner in real time. It's a forced proximity romance. It's a love letter to the movie Sleepless in Seattle, which I really, really appreciate. It was just done so well. But the thing that I specifically loved about this book so much is, again, just like the realism when it comes to the dialogue and the banter. It feels like the tone of voice is kind of serious at times, but serious because I think a lot of people can relate to it. Just the way that it's written is so well done. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel over the top. It doesn't feel hyperbolic. It actually feels like this could have happened. Obviously, again, it's through the backdrop of whimsy and romance, and you want a little bit of that kind of unrealistic nature thrown into these books, but it was just done so perfectly and in such a well-measured way. So the reason that I think you should read First Time Caller if you really enjoyed Just for the Summer is, one, for the banter. Both of these books have amazing dialogue and amazing banter. Two, I think both of the relationships in these books kind of develop over very unique circumstances. Here, it's kind of like a Reddit thread where our two main characters meet because of this Reddit thread that is posted, and here, obviously, it's because of a radio show. I think both of these books have a really perfect blend of humor and heart. It's light when it needs to feel light, and it's deep when it needs to feel deep. And I think both of these are a pretty solid slow burn. Like, they sort of get together early on in Just for the Summer, but not really. They're not really together. And here, it's kind of the same thing. There's a lot of tension building, and you just want them to get together so badly, and I think both of these books do a good job at pulling on the reader to just like root for these couples to get together until the very end. So I think both of these are amazing options, but if you loved Just for the Summer, 100% you need to read First Time Caller. All right, we're moving back to the fantasy world. I just realized that almost all of these suggestions are fantasy, and that's fine. That's par for the course, honestly. So you've just finished The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and you are riding that adrenaline high right now. You feel like you could absolutely run through a wall if you needed to. It is high, high emotions, and now you're wondering, what the heck do you read next? I would recommend The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. So in Addie LaRue, we follow our main character, Addie, who actually in the beginning of the book starts out in 18th century? 1714 in France. And we follow Addie as she makes this desperate deal with a dark and scary god to escape her unwanted life. But that deal goes a little bit south when she suddenly is forgotten by everybody that she's ever known. Basically, if somebody sees Addie, they can talk to her, they can have a conversation with her, but as soon as they look away, they completely forget that she ever existed or that they were talking to this woman. She essentially becomes invisible. But not only that, she's immortal. So she has to live this way forever. The Book of Doors follows our main character, Cassie, and I think similar to Addie, she's kind of living a life that has left her wanting. She has her normal routine, she has her daily life, she goes through the motions until one day that is disrupted when she comes across this magical book. It's called the Book of Doors, and it allows her to travel anywhere in the world to any door in the world. But with that comes a lot of consequences because there are a lot of really evil, terrible people that want to get their hands on the Book of Doors and use it for evil purposes. So she gets kind of swept up into this plot with this ensemble of people over here that really want to protect the Book of Doors and all of the other magical books that exist. And of course, the evil people over here that want to collect as many magical books as they can to use them for evil. And she's just sort of a normal girl that gets swept up in this thing that is way bigger than her. She doesn't really understand. She realizes that there's magic and fantastical elements going on. And again, it's kind of this good and evil sort of struggle. I think these books are different when it comes to the actual plot of them, but similar when it comes to the two main characters. I think that Cassie and Addie are actually pretty similar. I think that Addie, though, is what Cassie would become if she did live for centuries and centuries. I see a lot of similarities there where Cassie feels like early Addie as she's just sort of figuring everything out. I also think that these books are really similar because they are contemporary urban fantasy, so they both sort of take place in the backdrop of a city. I think they both take place in New York City. So the fantasy elements of it are actually pretty light because it is urban fantasy, but they're always there. It just is kind of this underlying tone of magical elements that are going on. I also think they're similar because they are very intense. There's a lot of high stakes going on. Addie sort of takes place more in the relational aspect, and the Book of Doors kind of takes place more in the plot aspect. These are probably the most different books from each other that I'll be recommending today, but they do kind of still elicit the same feeling from you as a reader. As you're going through it, it feels like a similar world, similar vibes. They both have this element of darkness to it. Like, they're not really light books. They're not funny books. They're definitely more serious and a little darker. The writing styles are similar. It's a very lyrical and thought-provoking narrative and way of writing. Both of them give you this sense of mystery and magic in the ordinary. It kind of comes back to it being more of an urban fantasy where you're taking very ordinary things and making them magical. There's themes of time and fate, and both of our main characters really just ultimately looking for freedom and a new life. And I also think that both of these books really deal with kind of the idea of loneliness as well, especially taking place in such a populated and crowded city like New York City. Addie, I think, is very lonely because she's lived for centuries and obviously nobody remembers her. Cassie is lonely because she's just kind of another face in a crowd. There's nothing setting her apart. There's nothing particularly unique about her until she kind of gets swept up in this plot. They're both beautiful, haunting, enchanting fantasies, and I think that if you liked Addie LaRue at all, you will definitely like Book of Doors, and they both will give you that crazy, intense adrenaline rush once you finish the book itself. All right, we've made it to my last recommendation, which is going to be based off of Caraval by Stephanie Garber. So if you read Caraval and you loved it, it might be because of our main character, Scarlet Dragna. She's always dreamed of attending Caraval, which is, in this world, a legendary magical performance where the audience participates in this kind of legendary very game. So at the beginning of the book, Scarlet and her sister Tella receive an invitation to attend Caraval. But as a part of this year's game, Tella is actually kidnapped and Scarlet has to find her and free her, and that's kind of the elaborate nature of the game. Scarlet is navigating this world of illusions and deception and super high stakes in order to find and free her sister. And she's trying to find the truth in a world where reality is kind of blurring and blending into fantasy. And she's doing it all with the help of Julian, who's kind of her counterpart and the romantic interest of this book. So if you liked Caraval, I would recommend that you read Sorcery of Thorns next. Sorcery of Thorns follows our main character, Elizabeth, who has been basically born and raised in this world's library where she learns about and guards these things called grimoires. And at the beginning of the book, one of the grimoires is sabotaged and Elizabeth is blamed for this crime. So she is sent to the capital of this city or this world or wherever she is to be placed in the custody of somebody named Nathaniel Thorne, who is a very powerful sorcerer. So Elizabeth is obviously swept up into this mystery of who actually committed this crime that she is being blamed for, what is going on in this world, in this kingdom that she's in right now. She has to kind of unravel this mystery in the same way that Scarlet has to unravel a mystery in order to find her sister, all within the backdrop of this really magical, fantastical world. That's why I think these books are really similar, is because it's kind of following two main characters that are going on this journey searching for clues and trying to find answers, all while paired up with Julian over here in Caraval and Nathaniel Thorne over here in Sorcery of Thorns. I think that those two love interest characters are actually really similar in their personalities. They're kind of darker, kind of grumpier, very mysterious, don't give all of the answers, which is very frustrating for our female main characters and readers as well. So they both take place in a very lush and magical world that I love. Both of these books have a lot of mystery and adventure in them. They both have a very strong-willed, clever, resourceful heroine, and they both have a swoon-worthy romance in my opinion. So if you liked Caraval, I think you would love Sorcery of Thorns. Caraval is a trilogy and Sorcery of Thorns is a standalone. I think that that could be good if you're trying to move on from Caraval and figure out what you want to read next. This kind of bridges the gap and gives you the same feelings that Caraval does while only having you commit to one book. So just to recap, if you liked the Cruel Prince trilogy, you should read the Traitor's Kiss trilogy. If you liked Throne of Glass and all of those books, you should read The Tiger at Midnight. If you liked Just for the Summer and that amazing romance, you should try First Time Caller, this amazing romance. If you liked The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, definitely try out The Book of Doors. And finally, if you liked Caraval, you need to read A Sorcery of Thorns. That's a lot of recommendations for you. If you liked these 5 books and series, you should try out these 5 books and series. I think they all kind of give you similar emotions, even if the plot itself is not always similar. It elicits the same feelings from you as a reader, which is why I think they would be good picks for you to try out if you liked these popular books. As always, thank you so much for watching and joining and hanging out with me on this little corner of the internet, and we will see you next time.